Hi everyone, and thank you for being here for this lecture. I am Dr. Julianne Scott-Pollock, and today we're going to be talking about communication and gender as cultural concepts we'll explore throughout the semester. First, let's talk a minute about what is communication and gender. In this course, gender is a term that we use to describe a shared reality we continually co-create through interacting with each other. Through our communication processes with the world, we come to understand the cultural concept of gender. But it's never stagnant, it's never finished. It is always something that we are renegotiating, re-understanding, that changes as we understand what it means to be a gendered body, a gendered cultural member, as we interact with others in the world. And a lot of this is going to be drawing on the work of Judith Butler. So gender is a familiar term, right? Sometimes there'll be a box that will ask you to check a box of what your gender is. People will throw gender reveal parties when they're expected parents, right? And we'll find out if they're having a biological male or a biological female. And those parties can be very revealing in lots of different ways because it also shows us that gender is not just biological sex, right? The parents aren't just excited that their baby is going to have a penis or that their baby is going to have a vagina. What they are excited about is this idea of a girl or a boy and what that means. And we'll talk more about that later on in the lecture. There also can be gendered activities in which we say this activity is for boys, or this activity is for girls. This is the girls' soccer team, right? So we have this idea of gender that we use in our daily lives, and we tend to understand what the person is asking. But gender, as a communication concept, as this culturally created term of identity that we come to understand, can also be a source of fear and anxiety, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that is. Judith Butler talks to us that gender can be a cultural phantasm, and phantasm is defined as an elusive, imagined threat to what culture knows to be true. And that imagined threat, that feeling of uncertainty, anxiety that can result in fear and angry responses, is to this idea of what the lived experience of gender should be to dominant culture and those who benefit from that expectation. So let's go back to that idea of that gender reveal, when someone is celebrating that their baby is going to be born biologically male and biologically female. There is this idea of an imagined future of what it means to be a boy or what it means to be a girl, and to grow into the lived experience of a man or a woman. And these ideas are extremely salient. I can remember when I had my fifth baby. My first four babies were boys. My last baby is a girl, and I remember women having tears in their eyes, being so excited that my baby being born was a girl, because there was going to be that experience of a little girl and a mother, a relationship they imagined that newborn having with me as a child and later an adult that they didn't think my boys could have. And they were so excited for me, right? We have this idea, this imagined reality of what it means to grow up biologically male or female in relation to others. But here's the thing. It's true that until very recently in cultural history, we tend to imagine the reality of what it meant to grow up as a boy or a girl into a man or a woman. Within U.S. culture, within Western culture, there was this idea of what that was going to look like. And there was this idea that it was going to be a heterosexual existence. It tended to be grounded in the white experience, and we'll explore that throughout the semester, we'll talk about the interactions of race and gender and what it means to be a gendered and raced body. The idea of it being a middle-class person, right? That middle-class upbringing that was the dominant, expected, lived experience in society. There was a dominant idea that the faith of that child would be Christian, and they would have ascribed to Christian values. Again, that Western look, the European look, the North American look of what it means to be human, right? And also that able-bodied experience, right? And as long as the baby's healthy, assuming that body was going to be normative, right? Those are this imagined reality were. Now, of course, all the way from the beginning of time, we've known that bodies have deviated from this reality, right? There's many cultures in which that idea of there was an assumed heterosexual experience, or even binary male and female experience, right? But within our Western culture, that is there. That idea of this is what it was going to look like. And only recently, right, have there become more boxes on the gender form. It used to be just male and female. Now it's male, female, other, prefer not to say. We realize it's more fluid, it's more open. Now, what this openness does is it changes the possibilities of our imagined stories of others, because we are aware of different kinds of identities, that people could be gay, lesbian, trans, right? All this idea that people are of all different races and ethnicities, that class experience is different, there are different faiths and lack of faith altogether, there are bodies that are not normative. There is a global understanding of experience. And what that disrupts was that much more narrow, imagined reality that up till recently assumed a man was going to be a cultural leader, a worker who would be supported by a woman, who would have his children, and his family would depend on him. Right? The roles were set. This is what people were going to experience, and deviating from that left people without that idea of what the purpose of their lives should be, that imagined reality that had been created for them, right? So if you did neatly fit in to that box of that heteronormative couple that way, then it was comfortable, or maybe not. And if you didn't, there was this idea of lacking. And we have a much more wider understanding now. And that wider understanding means there's many more possibilities, and all those possibilities can make those who enjoyed the much more narrowed structure because of the power and privilege being in it brought to feel that anxiety. So, again, gender gives us a vocabulary to communicate resistance to that assumed reality. We have all of these terms, gay, lesbian, trans, non-binary, gender expansive, to say, listen, not everything is going to be a binary, heteronormative, lived existence, and all of these different identities deserve space, deserve safety, deserve an opportunity to live and be prosperous in this world. And that creates anxiety for people who don't want to think about there being more than just that very narrow heteronormative experience. So, this leads to a fear and anxiety, right? About, oh my goodness, I have never thought of anybody who doesn't neatly fit into these boxes because I've always fit into the boxes and I want everyone else to fit into it. I want the imagined reality of my children to fit into it, right? And because of that, there becomes resistance to us having words, communicating the lived experience of people that are not in that heteronormative binary existence, right? And it means we don't want to talk about there being gay parents, right, to our children in schools. We don't want, we don't want education to include the reality of all these different bodies among us, of all these different gendered bodies beyond biological male and female and heteronormative. It makes people get nervous about the idea of people being protected classes in the workplace, right? That idea of making space that no matter that somebody's gendered identity should be welcomed and protected within the workplace, right? There's pushback on that, saying no, that should not be a protected class. The same idea when it comes to marriage, like we're defending the institution of marriage because it used to be comfortable for people who like the idea of it being a biological man, a biological woman, who are going to marry and have children. If you're comfortable with that idea of no, marriage is opening to all different kinds of gendered bodies, can be scary. The same way with healthcare, right? What do they go, what, that idea, there's legislation that will go after that idea of like, no, trans-affirming care should not be offered to workers in a workplace, should not be available to trans children as they're growing. There is this idea of we don't want these binaries disrupted, and we try to resist those binaries being disrupted through education, protection, and access. Because as we talk about it, remember, communication, having these terms that become familiar, become accepted, become ways for us to understand all the varying bodies in the world, is a way that we defy heterosexual and patriarchal binaries. So, now, communication at the center of our understanding of gender is powerful. We're going to explore throughout this semester how we understand and have vocabulary and meaning and knowledge surrounding bodies and the identities and lived experience of those bodies keeps renegotiating reality, make us have a more complex understanding of what it means to be human together in society. And we'll look all the way from our interpersonal interactions to our mass-mediated conversation. And we're going to expand beyond gender and how that interacts with other identities. Our next lecture is going to be on intersectionality and the embodied identities that live across and between cultural categories and power. We're going to look at how sexuality, how race, how socioeconomic status, how ability, how size all move together and help us understand what it means to be human in these gendered bodies that have broken across these binaries that we used to try to artificially push them into to understand a gender as an ever-evolving, complex, deeply personal, and largely cultural identity. Thanks so much. Reach out if you have any questions, and I'll see you again soon.